Would you believe it's been exactly 128 years since history's very first automobile race? Actually, that's not quite correct. We can't call it an automobile race because we're going so far back in time. 28 November 1895 to be specific, that the word automobile didn't even exist yet. In fact, one of the more vexing conundrums faced by the race organizers was what the hell to call the vehicles that were being raced. Horseless carriage? Motor wagon? Motor carriage? Gasoline wagon? I think that last one's probably my favorite. The point being, this is only less than 2 years after the first commercially available cars went onto the market, and each manufacturer sort of called their product a different thing. So which name did they settle on using for the race? Motorcycle. You heard right. There's no R in that word. It's motorcycle. And so was born the great Chicago Times-Herald motorcycle race of 1895. Total prize money, $5,000 to be distributed among the top 5 finishers, even though in the actual event only 3 cars wound up finishing, but we'll get to that. The race was announced in the 15 July issue of the Times-Herald. It was originally going to be held on the 2nd of November, and it was intended to be a one-way race from Chicago to Milwaukee. But then some of the prospective competitors went and inspected the roadway, such as it was, and they went back to the organizers and said, "Are you guys freaking high? Look, these vehicles are fine on flat, dry ground in the city, maybe on the outskirts of town, but our tiny engines and rickety little wooden wheels just can't manage Chicago to Milwaukee. We're sorry. I mean, give us another 10 years and some paved roads, and then maybe we'll talk." And so the course was duly changed. Chicago to Evanston and then back again for a total of 54 miles, 87 clicks for our Canadian viewers. 83 competitors entered the race, then the appointed day arrived, and 6 of them actually turned up. Some guys didn't finish building their cars in time, some got stranded or broke down on the way to Chicago. 2 of the pre-race favorites, Mr. Haynes from America and Mr. Benz from Germany, whose name you may have heard before, were stopped by the police upon driving their cars into the city, the incredulous officers declaring, "You can't drive these weird newfangled contraptions around in Chicago. Our streets are for horses. Are you mad?" It then occurred to the race organizers that this might put a damper on the entire event, so they postponed the race. They went to the city council, and they got an ordinance passed saying, yes, it is in fact legally permissible to drive motorcycles, on the streets of Chicago. By the time all the legislative red tape had been dealt with and all the competitors had managed to make it to the starting line, it was Thanksgiving Day, the 28th of November. Temperature, 38 degrees, with muddy roads and occasional snow drifts. Out of the original 83 entrants, they wound up with 7 total competitors, which is to say, they postponed the thing for 26 days and the number only increased by 1. But hey, what do you do? Carl Benz had 2 other cars in the field in addition to the one he himself was driving, so he had to feel pretty good about his chances, at least right up until his number 2 car struck a horse less than 5 minutes into the race and was thus rendered inoperable. The only other 4-wheeled gas-powered entrant was Frank Duria's patented motorized wagon. And there were a couple of very primitive 2-wheeled vehicles that tried to enter the competition, the thing we call motorcycles today, with the R. But as soon as they came to the first slightly uphill grade, you can probably guess what happened next. The final entrant was a 4-wheeled electric car, which made it less than a mile before its battery died due to the low temperatures. And I will leave it to you to make your own jokes about how not very much has changed with electric cars in the past 128 years. So you've got Frank Duria, Carl Benz, and Carl Benz's other car. They're the only ones that make it out of the Chicago city limits. As they reach Evanston and make the turn for home, it's a pretty closely run thing, but on the return leg, Duria pulls ahead and he keeps extending his lead. Eventually he crosses the finish line in a time of 10 hours, 23 minutes for an average speed of a blazing 7 miles per hour. The second Benz car, driven by Oscar Mueller, finishes an hour and a half later to claim second prize, except Mueller was no longer the driver because he had fallen unconscious from exposure to the elements. So the driving duties were taken over by a gentleman named Charles Brady King, and what a damn filthy collaborator that guy is, helping the Germans like that. Makes me sick, it does. So the Doria car wins first prize, $2,000 and a gold medal, and Benz takes home a total of $2,500 for his cars, finishing in second and third, respectively. Meanwhile, the puzzled townsfolk could be heard muttering to one another, 10.5 goddamn hours from here to Evanston and back? Jesus Christ, get yourself a 3-legged horse and you'll make better time!